the Andraxian Polytechnic Institute for Advanced Xenobiological Studies occupied 3 orbital platforms above the paradise world of Velustri 7, a planet so aggressively pleasant that its native species had evolved without developing a word for inconvenience. The institution prided itself on accepting only the galaxy's most promising young minds, which in practice meant the offspring of diplomatic families, corporate dynasties, and old money so ancient it predated faster-than-light travel. The campus gleamed with the sort of architectural excess that screamed, "Our endowment could buy your homeworld," in 14 languages simultaneously. It was, in every measurable way, the worst possible environment to send a human. Not that anyone had bothered to check. The administrative oversight was actually quite understandable. If you possessed the particular kind of bureaucratic sympathy that comes from watching an intern process 40,000 applications using a translation algorithm that had last been updated during the Kelvorian trade wars. Earth had submitted its application through proper channels, paid its fees in acceptable currency, and provided all necessary documentation. What the algorithm had failed to mention in its cheerful acceptance letter was that Earth held a very specific classification in the Galactic Survey database. Class 12 Deathworld. Hazard level, apocalyptic. Recommended contact protocol. Don't. But nobody checked the database. Nobody ever checked the database. And so, on a morning that would later be marked in the school's disaster preparedness manual as the incident we don't discuss in fundraising materials, a human student arrived for her first day. She stepped off the shuttle with the kind of careful precision that prey animals use when entering predator territory, though she didn't think of it that way. She just thought everyone else looked very delicate, and her mother had always taught her to be careful around delicate things. This was a reasonable concern. The Velustrians averaged 40 kilograms and possessed bones with the structural integrity of breadsticks. The Quilvan students were essentially sentient gas clouds with anxiety disorders. Even the Crethans, who considered themselves quite robust, would later be described by medical staff as having the tensile strength of wet origami. The human stood 167 centimeters tall, massed 61 kilograms, and had a bone density that would make a starship hull envious. She had brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, brown eyes that tracked movement with unsettling precision, and the kind of posture that came from a childhood spent in 1G gravity while every other student had grown up in conditions that made oppressive seem like a compliment. Her name was listed in the registry as Student 847 Ter 3. Because the registration system had crashed trying to process the phonetic complexity of human names, she answered to that one from the weird planet, the exchange student, or sometimes just, "Hey, you," delivered in the universal tone of casual cruelty that transcended species barriers. The bullying started on day 3. Not immediately, which was almost merciful. The first 48 hours had been consumed by orientation, during which she'd learned that the cafeteria's universal nutrition paste tasted like sadness mixed with regret, that the dormitory gravity setting of 0.4 G made her feel like she was constantly falling in slow motion, and that approximately 90% of her classmates had never encountered a species that still possessed what they delicately termed precognitive biological response systems. They meant fear. They meant adrenaline. They meant the entire cocktail of hormones and neurotransmitters that Earth had thoughtfully installed in its dominant species after millions of years of being enthusiastically murdered by everything from saber-toothed cats to microscopic parasites. Her classmates found this primitively fascinating. Zelthor was a Kreth, one of the reptilian species that dominated the galactic corporate sector through a combination of mathematical genius and the kind of networking skills that came from having 3 brains operating in parallel. He stood nearly 2 meters tall when he bothered to fully extend his vertebrae, possessed scales that shifted through iridescent purples and blues depending on his mood, and had the distinctive crown of cranial ridges that marked him as minor nobility in the Crethan prosperity sphere. He was also, and this was crucial to understanding the next several weeks, a spectacular jackass. "I hear your species still experiences physical pain," he announced during advanced biochemistry, his 3 brains apparently coordinating to produce maximum condescension. How quaint. Most civilized species evolved past that particular design flaw about 6 million years ago. The human looked up from her datapad, where she'd been struggling with a chemical formula that her professor had helpfully provided in a base 13 mathematical system. We also evolved to survive on a planet where the atmosphere is mildly corrosive. The local fauna views us as snacks, and the weather actively tries to kill us quarterly. Different priorities. This was a mistake. Not because it was untrue. Earth's classification as a Class 12 Deathworld was, if anything, generous. The Galactic Survey Corps had initially proposed Class 14, Extinction Event in Progress, before a committee review noted that humans had not only survived their environment, but had somehow thrived to the point of developing interstellar travel. This was so statistically improbable that 3 different xenobiologists had rage-quit the committee in protest. No, it was a mistake because it established her as someone who would respond to provocation. And in the ecosystem of elite academic institutions across the galaxy, that made her prey. The incident started small. Zelthor's cronies would adjust the environmental controls in her dormitory, cycling through temperature extremes that would have sent most species into medical crisis. The human would wake up, mutter something about worse than camping in Minnesota, and adjust her blankets accordingly. They reprogrammed her schedule to add extra gravity during her morning routine, hoping to see her collapse. She arrived to breakfast slightly more tired than usual and consumed her nutrition paste without comment. They introduced a mild paralytic into her water supply. Nothing dangerous by galactic standards, just enough to cause temporary numbness. She noticed immediately something about her prey species threat detection that made her taste for chemical irregularities, apparently, and simply switched to sealed beverage containers. This, Zelthor decided, required escalation. The Quilven twins, Zasi and Zosi, were sentient gas clouds who communicated through color shifts and found the entire concept of solid matter to be disappointingly limiting. They were also blessed with the kind of casual cruelty that came from never having to worry about physical consequences. When you're a diffuse collection of charged particles, very little poses an actual threat. They discovered that the human possessed what her species called ticklishness, a bizarre evolutionary holdover from something to do with grooming behavior and parasite detection. This was, in their opinion, hilarious. They would drift through walls during her study sessions and trigger this response, watching her flail and gasp with what they assumed was distress. She tolerated this exactly 4 times before she showed up to the library with a sealed environment suit and a personal atmospheric regulator. The twins found this significantly less amusing, primarily because their primary method of interaction now involved pressing their gaseous forms against transparent plastic while she serenely continued her homework. "You're being unreasonable," Zasi complained, its chromatic patterns shifting into irritated reds and oranges. "You're being intrusive," the human replied without looking up. "We've had this conversation. It's just harmless fun." "Your definition of harmless is doing a lot of heavy lifting there." Zosi pulsed with indignation. Everyone else thinks it's funny. Everyone else isn't studying for xenobiology practicals while being actively harassed by the subjects. The twins withdrew, their collective color scheme suggesting they were plotting revenge. The human made a mental note to check her suit seals more carefully and returned to memorizing the 17 different reproductive strategies employed by Velustrian flora. The breaking point came during physical education. The term physical education was something of a misnomer, given that most students approached physical activity with the enthusiasm of wet cats. The class existed primarily to fulfill an archaic requirement in the Institute's charter, written back when people believed that academic excellence required a sound body to accompany a sound mind. Modern educational theory had largely abandoned this notion, but institutional inertia was a powerful force. The instructor, a Velustrian named Kelm, who possessed the professional detachment of someone who'd long ago given up on achieving anything meaningful, had designed the day's activity around low-gravity sports. Specifically, Zero-G Ball, a game that involved complex three-dimensional movement, strategic thinking, and absolutely no physical contact whatsoever. This was, the instructor felt, perfectly safe for all species involved. The instructor was catastrophically wrong. "Teams of 5, Kelm announced, their crystalline voice chiming through the gymnasium's speakers. "Standard tournament rules. First to 10 goals wins." The human found herself assigned to a team through the kind of random selection process that felt actively malicious. Her teammates consisted of a Velustrian, who looked like they'd rather be literally anywhere else, 2 Quilvan, who immediately dispersed to opposite ends of the court, and a Myoxy, whose entire contribution was to anchor themselves to a wall and pray for the period to end. Opposing them, Zelthor and his carefully selected crew of premium jackasses. "Try to keep up, primitive," Zelthor called out as the ball materialized in the center court. His scales shifted to confident golds and greens. "Though I suppose your species is more comfortable on solid ground where you belong." The human said nothing. She'd learned that responses only encouraged him. The game began poorly. Zero-G Ball required the kind of three-dimensional spatial reasoning that came naturally to species who'd evolved in low-gravity environments or gas clouds. The human, products of a 1G gravity well, had to manually calculate trajectories that her opponents intuited instinctively. She missed the first 3 passes, collided with 2 walls, and accidentally launched herself into the ceiling with enough force to crack the safety padding. "Magnificent," Zelthor crowed, executing a perfect spiral dive to intercept the ball. "Truly, your species' contribution to galactic civilization becomes clearer by the moment. Entertainment value." His team scored, then scored again. By the 4th goal, they'd stopped really trying, instead taking time to demonstrate increasingly elaborate scoring methods, while the human struggled with basic momentum conservation. "You know what your problem is," Zelthor said, hovering just outside her reach while his teammates prepared another show-off goal. "Your species never learned to let go. You're stuck in your gravity well, clinging to your rock, too primitive to understand freedom of movement." The human grabbed a handhold, breathing harder than she wanted to admit. "That's not how evolution works." "No? Then explain how you're so catastrophically unfit for civilized existence." "Give me a minute, I'm working on it." "Take all the time you need," Zelthor said, his scales shifting to amused teals. "We're not in any hurry." He turned his back on her, a calculated insult, the universal gesture of dismissal. His teammates laughed, their various species-specific communication methods, all conveying the same message. "You're beneath our concern." This was when things went wrong, or right, depending on your perspective. Because Zelthor, in his confident cruelty, made a critical error. He'd been using his species' natural advantage in zero-G to stay just out of range, hovering in what he considered a safe zone. What he failed to account for was that humans, despite their gravity-well origins, possessed something most civilized species had long ago sacrificed on the altar of efficiency. Explosive muscle fiber. Fast-twitch muscles developed from millennia of running down prey across open savannas, from throwing spears at targets that really didn't want to be hit, from climbing trees to escape things with more teeth than good intentions. The human body was essentially a catapult wrapped in skin, and the universe was about to receive a demonstration. She pushed off, not the careful, measured push of someone accustomed to zero-G movement. The full force, Earth gravity compensating, prey-chasing launch that her muscles assumed was normal operating procedure. She crossed 15 meters in under a second. Zelthor's 3 brains registered her movement, calculated the intercept trajectory, and arrived at a collective conclusion. Oh no. The impact was, by human standards, relatively gentle. She'd pulled her strength at the last second, some deep-seated instinct warning her that full contact would break things that shouldn't be broken. She essentially tapped him with her shoulder while grabbing the ball. Zelthor's species, who'd evolved in 0.3G and built their entire civilization around the assumption that physical violence was something barbarians did, experienced this gentle tap as the equivalent of being hit by a cargo transport. He didn't so much fly backward as teleport through space, his trajectory describing a perfect parabola that terminated at the far wall, with a sound like a sack of expensive cutlery hitting tile. His scales flickered through the entire color spectrum before settling on a shade that universal translators helpfully rendered as, "Oh gods, I'm dying." The gymnasium went silent. Then the alarm started. Medical drones swarmed from ceiling compartments. Instructor Kelm's crystalline voice shattered into harmonic screams. The other students scattered, their various forms of locomotion creating a chaos of movement that resembled a particularly demented ballet. And the human just floated there, holding the ball, her expression transitioning from surprised to horrified, to that specific flavor of resigned terror that comes from knowing you've created a situation that will require paperwork. "I barely touched him," she said to no one in particular. This was technically true. By human standards, she'd been positively gentle. By galactic standards, she'd just committed assault with a deadly weapon, where the weapon was her entire musculoskeletal system. The medical drones reached Zelthor first, scanners activated, producing the kind of urgent beeping that medical equipment universally reserved for "this is very bad." His scales had locked into trauma gray, his breathing had gone irregular, and preliminary scans suggested he'd cracked 3 ribs, fractured his left arm, and experienced a concussion across all 3 brains simultaneously. Student 847 Tier 3. Instructor Kelm's voice cut through the chaos, harmonics stripped down to authoritative crystals. "Remain where you are. Security has been notified." "I didn't mean to." "Remain where you are." She remained where she was. Security arrived in the form of 2 Velustrian peacekeepers wearing full containment gear and carrying what appeared to be neural disruptors. They approached her the way bomb disposal experts approach suspicious packages, which was not unreasonable given that she'd just demonstrated the capacity for casual violence that most species required heavy machinery to achieve. "No sudden movements," the first peacekeeper said, their voice filtered through speakers. "I'm not moving." "Good. Continue not moving. We're going to escort you to administrative quarantine." "Quarantine? I'm not sick." "The quarantine is for everyone else's protection." This seemed unfair, but then again, She'd just put someone in the hospital by accident. Fair had probably left the building around the same time as her hopes for a normal academic experience. The walk to administrative quarantine took 15 minutes and passed through 3 security checkpoints, each requiring retinal scans, species verification, and confirmation from a supervisor who looked at her with the expression of someone reevaluating their career choices. They installed her in a holding room that was clearly designed for dangerous species. Reinforced walls, triple-sealed door, and atmospheric controls that could render the room uninhabitable in approximately 30 seconds, if necessary. She sat on the bench bolted to the floor and contemplated her life choices. 2 hours later, Dean Sikora arrived. The Dean was a myoxy, one of the crystalline species that communicated through light refraction and considered linear time to be more of a suggestion than a rule. They manifested in the room without opening the door, which was apparently a myoxy thing, and definitely not as reassuring as the Dean seemed to think it was. "Student 847-3, the Dean said, their voice emanating from several points in space simultaneously. "We need to discuss your actions." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought—" "You thought what exactly?" The Dean's light patterns shifted to something that might have been curiosity. That casual violence was acceptable behavior? "No, I just... Where I'm from, that wouldn't have even bruised someone. We do that level of contact in sports. Children do that level of contact." The Dean's light patterns stuttered. "Children?" "Yeah, we play contact sports, rugby, football, hockey. They're games." "You play games involving physical collision?" "I mean, yes. Is that weird?" The Dean's manifestation flickered out entirely. When they reappeared, several important-looking documents were floating around them, each displaying information in languages the human couldn't read. "Student 847-3, the Dean said slowly. "Has anyone from your institution explained what kind of world Earth is classified as?" "It's a planet? It's where humans are from. According to the Galactic Survey database, Earth is a Class 12 Deathworld. Do you understand what that means?" "Not really, no." The Dean spent the next 20 minutes explaining, in excruciating detail, exactly what that meant. Earth's gravity was nearly 3 times galactic standard. Its atmosphere contained oxygen at concentrations that would be considered toxic to most species. Its temperature fluctuations would qualify as extreme environmental hazards anywhere else. The planet experienced regular catastrophic weather events that Earth's inhabitants had given casual names like hurricanes and blizzards, as if planetary-scale destruction was just another Tuesday. The wildlife defied rational categorization. Predators with nightmare fuel characteristics. Prey animals that fought back with alarming effectiveness. Insects that carried diseases capable of destabilizing entire ecosystems. Plants that evolved toxic defense mechanisms so effective that Earth's inhabitants had developed resistances that would make biochemical weapons specialists weep with professional jealousy. And humans had somehow survived all of this. More than survived, thrived. Built civilizations. Developed art, culture, philosophy, and eventually technology sophisticated enough to leave their gravity well and apply for admission to institutions like the Andraxian Polytechnic. "Your species," the Dean said, their light patterns suggesting something between awe and horror, "possesses bone density, muscle mass, immune system efficiency, and stress response capabilities that exceed military-grade augmentation standards. You're not students. You're walking weapons platforms that somehow learned calculus." The human processed this information. "So, when I pushed Zelthor, you subjected him to force levels that we use in industrial applications. His species considers a firm handshake to be assault. Oh, indeed. They sat in silence for a moment, the dean's light patterns cycling through what might have been the crystalline equivalent of a migraine. Am I expelled? The human finally asked. That's complicated. The dean manifested several more documents. The Institute has never had to address this situation. We don't have protocols for students who are existentially dangerous, through no fault of their own. I can be more careful. You were being careful. That's what concerns me. So, what happens now? The dean's light patterns settled into something that suggested determination. Now, we do something that should have been done during your application process. We read your entire file. The file made for fascinating, if terrifying, reading. Earth submission had included standard biological surveys, environmental data, and cultural documentation. What it hadn't emphasized, what the translation algorithm had apparently decided was unimportant, was the sheer scale of horrors the planet casually inflicted on its inhabitants. Average gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. Galactic standard, 3.7. Atmospheric oxygen concentration, 21%. Galactic standard, 8%. Temperature range, 89 to 57 degrees Celsius. Galactic standard, 15 to 25. Natural predators. Too many to list comprehensively, but highlights included apex carnivores weighing up to 600 kilograms with bite forces capable of crushing bone. Venomous creatures numbering in the thousands. Parasites that made the Myoxai horror writers seem unimaginative. Disease vectors. Also too many to list, but humanity had apparently developed immune systems capable of fighting off everything from microscopic bacteria to multicellular parasites, often simultaneously. Your species, the dean said faintly, has a saying about what doesn't kill you making you stronger. Yeah, that's common. It's not metaphorical, is it? I mean, not really. Our immune systems literally get stronger by being exposed to diseases. The dean's light patterns flickered rapidly. That's insane. It's just biology? It's insane. The investigation took 3 days. During that time, the human remained in administrative quarantine, which was honestly more comfortable than her dormitory once they adjusted the gravity to something reasonable. They brought her meals, actual food, not nutrition paste, which suggested someone had finally checked Earth's dietary requirements. Schoolwork, delivered by drone, and a series of very carefully worded questionnaires about her homeworld. The questions revealed how little the galaxy actually understood about Deathworld species. Question 47. Does your species experience fear as a survival mechanism? Answer: yes, constantly. It's basically our default state. Question 63. Can your species survive environmental damage? Answer: define damage. We heal from broken bones. Is that what you mean? Question 89. Does your species practice ritualized combat? Answer: we have like 50 different martial arts, multiple contact sports, and my high school had a boxing club. So yes. Each answer apparently caused minor panic attacks among the review committee. On day 4, Dean Sikora returned with news. We've reached a decision, the dean said, manifesting with an entourage of professors and administrators who maintained what they probably thought was a safe distance. You will not be expelled. The human felt relief wash over her. Thank you. However, conditions must be established. The dean gestured, and holographic documents appeared. First, all physical education activities will be modified for your participation. You'll be assigned to solo training modules. Okay. Second, environmental warnings will be installed in common areas. Other students need to be aware of your presence. That seems reasonable. Third, And this is non-negotiable. You will attend mandatory cultural exchange sessions. Other students need to understand that you're not intentionally threatening. You're just from Earth. Is that last part really necessary? Student 847, Tier 3. 3 different species have filed formal complaints claiming you're an undeclared security asset. We need to establish that you're a teenager, not a covert operative. I'm literally just trying to study xenobiology. Yes, well, xenobiology students typically don't hospitalize their classmates through casual contact. Fair point. The cultural exchange sessions were, in a word, weird. They gathered students from across the institute, 20 different species, each more confused than the last, and sat them in a lecture hall that had been hastily reinforced, just in case. The human stood at the front, flanked by 2 security drones that she'd been assured were purely precautionary, and answered questions about Earth. Is it true your planet has plate tectonics? A Velustrian asked, their crystalline structure quivering with horror. Yeah, the continents move around. It's slow, though. Slow. Like centimeters per year. Your ground moves. I mean, yes. Does yours not? The Velustrian made a sound like wind chimes falling downstairs and had to be escorted out. A Quilvin drifted forward, color patterns suggesting intense curiosity. We heard your species evolved from predators. Is this true? Technically, we evolved from prey animals that learned to hunt. Omnivores, actually. You eat meat and plants. We're pretty flexible. The Quilvin's colors shifted through shocked purples. You kill other living things for sustenance? I mean, plants are alive too. You kill them. That's different. Is it, though? That particular discussion required mediator intervention. The questions continued, each revealing new gaps in galactic understanding of Deathworld psychology. Do you really feel pain every time you're injured? Yes. That's literally the point of pain. Can you survive without climate control? We did it for thousands of years, so yes. Is it true humans can run for hours without stopping? Marathon runners exist, so yes. Do you really heal from broken bones? Yes, bones are living tissue. Can you actually lift things heavier than your body weight? Olympic weightlifters would be insulted by that question. Each answer was met with varying degrees of disbelief, horror, and what might have been grudging respect. Zelthor attended the 3rd session. He arrived on a medical hover platform, his scales still locked in recovery gray, his 3 brains presumably working overtime to process the trauma of being shoulder-checked into next week. The human spotted him immediately and felt her stomach drop. "I'm sorry," she said before anyone could stop her. "I really didn't mean to hurt you." Zelthor's scales flickered through several colors before settling on something that universal translators rendered as resigned acceptance of absurd reality. "I know," he said, his voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance. "I've read the reports. I've seen the database entries. I've spent 3 days watching documentary footage of Earth. And your planet is horrifying. You have apex predators that hunt in packs. You have weather systems that generate winds capable of destroying structures. You have tectonic activity that produces earthquakes measuring 9.0 on scales I didn't know extended that high. It's not that bad once you get used to it. You have parasites that burrow into your brain. Those are pretty rare. They exist." The room fell silent. Zelthor's platform drifted closer, his scales shifting to colors that suggested he was fighting for composure. "I bullied you," he said finally. "I used my advantages to make your life difficult. I thought you were weak." "I am weak. By human standards, I'm pretty average." Your average? Maybe slightly below average. I was never great at sports back home. Zelthor's scales cycled through colors that suggested his brains were experiencing critical errors. The Galactic Database lists humans as Class 12 Deathworld species. Military analysts have classified your species as potential extinction level threat if provoked. You're telling me you're average? I got a C in gym class. What do the strong ones do? Professional athletes? They're really good at sports. What sports? You know, running, jumping, throwing things, hitting each other. Hitting each other. In controlled environments with rules and referees. For recreation. For recreation. Zelthor's platform slowly backed away. I'm going to need more therapy. The sessions continued for 2 more weeks. Slowly, painfully, the student body began to understand that their primitive classmate wasn't dangerous through malice. She was dangerous because her normal was their apocalypse scenario. The Velustrian students installed padding in common areas. The Quilvin twins apologized for their earlier harassment, their color patterns suggesting genuine remorse mixed with existential dread. Even Zelthor, once he'd recovered enough to leave his platform, approached her with something resembling respect. I wanted to thank you, he said one evening in the cafeteria, his scales showing cautious greens. For putting you in the hospital. For pulling your hit. He gestured at his healing bones. The medical staff analyzed the impact. If you'd used full force, wouldn't have survived. You recognized the danger and adjusted in microseconds. I just didn't want to hurt you. That level of control, from a species that supposedly hasn't evolved past biological response systems, is remarkable. It's just being careful. No, Zelthor said. It's being civilized. More civilized than I was. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, the human picking at her nutrition paste, now properly formulated for human dietary requirements. Zelthor adjusting his platform settings. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Of course. Why did you do it? The bullying, I mean. Zelthor's scales shifted through colors that suggested embarrassment. Because I could. Because you were different, and difference is threatening, and I had the power to make you uncomfortable. It's not a good reason. No, it's not. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Genuinely. I was cruel because I thought there would be no consequences. I was wrong. The consequence being you learned I could accidentally break you. The consequence being I learned you chose not to, even when you had every reason to fight back. The human considered this. I still feel bad about hurting you. I deserved it. Not the injury specifically, but the lesson. Zelthor's scales settled into thoughtful blues. The galaxy is comfortable, safe. We've eliminated most sources of danger, most forms of suffering. We've forgotten what it means to survive. And humans, remember? Humans never forgot. Your entire species is a monument to survival against impossible odds. He gestured around the cafeteria. Everyone here? We're tourists in safety. You're a native of chaos. That's a weird way to phrase it. It's an accurate way to phrase it. The semester continued. Slowly, the human's presence became normal, or as normal as anything could be, when you were a walking reminder of the universe's capacity for horror. She attended classes, submitted assignments, and carefully participated in group projects while maintaining what she thought of as safe distance protocols. The other students adapted. Warning labels appeared in common areas. High-gravity species present, maintain distance. Environmental suits became fashionable among species who wanted to interact without worrying about accidental contact. The gymnasium installed a separate training module specifically designed for Deathworld physics. By the end of her first year, the human had achieved a peculiar status. Not respected exactly, but acknowledged. She was the student who'd accidentally revealed how soft the galaxy had become, how far removed from survival most species had drifted. She was, in her own way, a walking thought experiment. What happens when comfortable civilizations encounter those forged in adversity? The answer, it turned out, was growth. Uncomfortable, terrifying growth. The incident report from her first day eventually made its way through administrative channels, across departmental boundaries, and into the hands of the Galactic Educational Standards Committee. They reviewed the case, consulted with xenobiologists, and reached a conclusion that would reshape interstellar education policy. Effective immediately, all institutions accepting off-world students were required to cross-reference applications against the Galactic Survey database. Class 12 Deathworlds would require special accommodation protocols. Students from such worlds would receive specialized orientation programs. The human learned about this policy change from Dean Sikora during their end-of-year review. "You've caused quite the upheaval," the dean said, their light patterns suggesting amusement. "I really was just trying to study." "I know. That's what makes this so perfect." The dean manifested a document. "The committee is calling it the Survival Species Education Protocol. You're literally the reason it exists. Is that good or bad? It's necessary. The galaxy has been comfortable for too long. We'd forgotten that strength comes in forms other than technology and tradition." The dean's patterns shifted to something warmer. "You've reminded us that sometimes the most powerful thing a species can possess is the ability to endure. I just didn't want to die in gym class. And yet, you've changed interstellar policy. Funny how that works." The human returned to Earth that summer for break, stepping off the shuttle into 1G gravity that felt like coming home after months of floating. Her mother picked her up from the spaceport, took one look at her, and immediately knew something had changed. "How was school?" her mother asked. "Weird," the human said. "I accidentally hospitalized someone during dodgeball." "That's nice, dear." "Then I became the reason they changed galactic education policy." "Did you make friends?" "Eventually, after they stopped being terrified of me." Her mother nodded, navigating Earth traffic with the casual disregard for mortality that made human driving legendary across the galaxy. "That sounds about right. Your father accidentally started a trade war during his first diplomatic mission. It's a family tradition." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true." They drove in silence for a while, the human watching her homeworld pass by. Dangerous, chaotic, beautiful Earth, with its aggressive weather and enthusiastic predators and casual disregard for anything resembling galactic safety standards. "Mom?" she said finally. "Yes?" "Is Earth really as dangerous as everyone says?" Her mother considered the question while executing a turn that would have given any Velustrian a heart attack. "Dangerous is relative. To us, this is normal. To them, we're living in an active combat zone. That's weird. That's perspective." Her mother smiled. "You're going back next semester?" "Yeah, I've got 2 more years." "Good. Show them what humans are capable of when we're trying not to break things." The human returned to the Andraxian Polytechnic for her second year with a care package from Earth. Beef jerky, classified as exotic survival rations. Hot sauce, classified as chemical weapon, recreational use only. And a volleyball, classified as potential kinetic projectile, handle with extreme caution. She arrived to find her dormitory room had been relocated to a reinforced wing. Her class schedule included a note: environmental warnings installed in all assigned locations, and her student ID had been updated with a small icon that universal translators helpfully rendered as "Caution, Deathworld native." Zelthor was waiting in the common area, his scales showing friendly golds. "Welcome back. We've missed our resident apocalypse survivor." "That's not my official title." "It absolutely should be." They walked to orientation together, the human carefully moderating her pace so Zelthor's platform could keep up. Other students nodded greetings, cautious but genuine. The Quilvan twins drifted past, their colors showing welcome mixed with healthy respect. "Things have changed," the human observed. "You changed them," Zelthor replied. "For the better, I think." "By accidentally putting you in the hospital?" "By showing us that strength isn't just technological advancement or cultural sophistication. Sometimes it's just surviving another day on a planet that really wants you dead." The human considered this as they entered the lecture hall for Advanced Xenobiology 2. The professor, a new one, specially hired to handle Deathworld curriculum, looked up as they entered. "Ah, student 847 Tur 3, the professor said. "I've read your file. Fascinating stuff. We'll be covering extreme environment adaptations this semester. I hope you'll contribute your perspective." "I'll try not to break anything. That's all we ask." The semester began. The human studied, learned, and carefully navigated a galaxy that was slowly learning to accommodate species forged in chaos. She made friends, enemies, and a reputation as the student who'd accidentally revolutionized interstellar education by being too durable to bully. And somewhere in the Galactic Educational Standards Committee archives, her incident report gathered digital dust, a monument to the day the comfortable galaxy remembered that it was built on the bones of survivors. The universe, it turned out, had room for everyone, even those who'd been forged on Deathworlds and just wanted to study in peace. Though they strongly recommended keeping